first thing I've got to say is phew, because I had no idea what this panel were going to say, and they had no idea what I'm going to say. And thankfully, we kind of line up. So that's good. So yeah, I'm Geoff. My plan is to talk to you a little bit about my experience of working with product owners over the last 15 years with Agile teams. Some of the things that, I'm not going to talk about the jargon, the technology, the meetings, the ceremonies, or process, or anything like that. It's a little bit about, to piggyback on some of the words that these guys use, mindset, I suppose, characteristics, traits, things like that. You heard MVP. You're going to get a lot of three-letter acronyms if you don't have enough already. I heard MGS, MSG, SQP. I don't know what they mean. Something to do with Chinese food, isn't it? Keeping you up at night. So I'm going to introduce another one to you, not because it's a good one, but because it's something I came across recently that sort of touched into something that I fundamentally have found useful in working with product owners, and that's the RAT. Okay, has anybody heard of the RAT before? Yeah? So not many. I say it probably hasn't caught on because it's not a sexy acronym. But I was going to talk to you today about the product owners being the rat catcher in the organization. And the RAT stands for the riskiest assumption to test. All right. Now, as a product owner, you've heard about failing fast. You've heard about MVP, getting something out to market, test and learn, things like that. My background was at British Telecom. And seeing as I'm being videoed, I will talk about a hypothetical national telecoms provider back in the sort of early 2000s that was rolling out a national broadband upgrade to the network. And hypothetically, this company were in about, say, 2004, 5, something like that. This rollout was 5 years behind schedule. They'd hypothetically spent £1 billion and had not one customer on this new network. And they were under a lot of pressure. The board were put under pressure by the regulator. And the regulator was effectively saying, this looks a little suspicious, hypothetical telecoms company, because part of the results of this rollout is to open up this network to all the other telecoms providers in this country. And are you just being slow to suppress competition? And the response from the board was, no, we're just incompetent. It's not malicious, it's just pure incompetence. And they said, well, if you don't get your act together, we will break you up. Okay, we will break the company up. Hypothetically, that may have happened. But right then, Agile was one of those things that was being used on little software projects. Okay, you can do Agile on your little software projects and your greenfield developments, but the big projects, they need a big boy process. Yeah, the ones where we're making commitments to the board, yeah, grown-ups. That's for grown-ups, not this Agile stuff. But they got to the stage where actually they didn't really have much choice. They spent £1 billion, still didn't have anyone on the network, and it was kind of do or die. The share price was taking a dive, and so they said, right, Agile people, fill your boots. What are you going to do? Now, as you'll probably come to learn, the more you work with Agile teams, basically the Agile answer to anything is get loads of people in a room with Post-it notes. So that's what we did. We got software engineers, hardware engineers, network engineers, field engineers, those people who you see on the side of the road opening up those green cabinets full of wires. We got them in the room. We had third party, all hypothetical. We had people from Cisco and all our third parties who made all the switches and things in a room, and we said, right, one question we need to answer today. How long will it take us to get one house on this new network? And the response from the room was, it doesn't work that way, Geoff. So, well, obviously it doesn't work that way because we've been going for 8 years and we still haven't got one house on the network, but let's assume that we have to. How would we go about it and how long would it take? They said, no, Geoff, seriously, it doesn't work that way. It would be really, really inefficient. You'd have to dig up roads just to get one house on the network. It would be a complete waste of money. And the response was, all right, we're desperate. We'll take inefficient right now. Okay, we will take that. How long? They said, no, seriously, it doesn't work that way, Geoff. It's done by postcode. So if you get one house, you get 13 or 14 or 15 houses on the network. Okay, happy days. How long to get 13 houses on the network, boys and girls? And they argued for a bit, and they used up loads of Post-it notes, and 3M were very happy, and eventually they came up with the answer of 6 weeks, but it has to be Wolverhampton. Now, to this day, I don't know why. My suspicion is that quite a lot of people lived in Wolverhampton and wanted to ease their commute. But we took it. We said, all right, Wolverhampton, fine. Everybody get down to Wolverhampton, 6 weeks, off you go. Within 2 weeks, they raised the flag, the red flag. This isn't going to work. We've got a problem. It's going to take us another couple of months to, we've got a problem with the exchange building. We need to order some stuff. It's going to take a while to retrofit this stuff. A couple of months. We said, well, we can't. We've already told the stock market, we've told the regulator 6 weeks to do this. We can't wait another couple of months. And someone said, it's all right. We could go to Cardiff. Because Cardiff's got a different type of exchange building to the one in Wolverhampton, and we wouldn't have that problem. Everybody on the train to Cardiff, all right? Happy days. 5 weeks later, we had, I think, 15 houses on the network. We had something, we had a set-top box in somebody's house. We had those little microfilters in the wall. People could use fiber optic broadband, the massive half a gig as it was then, or something ridiculous like that. And that was great, all right? We could have started charging them money, but we didn't because they were our guinea pigs. What's important about that story? What's important about that story? I'm genuinely asking that question. What's the value of that? Yes?
Learning you could actually do it.
Learning we could do it. So we could prove to ourselves that it's possible because we had a lot of skepticism and doubt that we could do this. We could prove to the regulators that we are actually a little bit more competent than you think. Yeah, that we have a process in place that we could replicate and we could roll out across the rest of the country. What else was important?
You could move your little bit. There was a bit of nimbleness in there.
Yeah, there was some flexibility and adjustment, and we also proved that we know a little bit of the different exchanges, and we can react to changes. That's a good thing. Another thing? Yes, sir?
Time didn't move, so you didn't go past your deadline.
Well, we did by a week, but not by the couple of months that we wanted to. So again, we were quite responsive. There's an even bigger thing. Remember? Yes, sir?
Find your MVP.
We did define our MVP, get one house or 13 houses on the network. Nigel?
Opportunity for some feedback for your 15 houses.
Right, we can get some feedback on what they like and what they don't like right at the back.
You had everyone there who could answer it and come up with a solution.
We did. We proved cross-functionality. We got those networks and that collaboration involved. Yes? We worked on the mindset. Neha, you had your hand
I
up.
was going to say the same thing.
Collaboration. Yep. We did get value to the customer.
Reduced your risk.
We reduced our risk. What was our risk?
Getting broken up.
Yeah, getting broken up. What was the risk that was yes at the back? Say again? Yeah, we got commitment. We were working together with our partners and everything.
The risk was putting the whole country on it and it failing.
Right.
Preparing all the
Our riskiest assumption test, we didn't know what that was until we went to Wolverhampton and we tried to do the whole end-to-end process. We didn't know that we had this problem in the exchange building. We equally didn't know that problem in that particular exchange building was going to be replicated in hundreds of exchange buildings across the country. And in our efficient plan, we wouldn't have found that out for another 5 years. Okay? Now we did things very inefficiently to be effective. So Nigel's talking about efficiency, and we can be more efficient, all right? But actually, from an Agile perspective, it's about finding out where the value is and being slightly short-term inefficient to get there to avoid wasting the big amount of money, dollars, capacity. So we found that out a lot quicker, and we could do something about that. Very inefficient, but effective. So that's the riskiest assumption. Find out if I'm taking a very negative view here, right? But as a product owner, if your product is going to fail, would you rather it failed in month 2 or month 22? Month 2, right? It's cheaper. You can do something more with your money. You can pivot. You can perhaps fix that problem. But you've got to be quite brave to open yourself up to that possibility, and it might be inefficient in the short term. Somebody asked, I think Joel asked me, how did I get roped into this? And it didn't take a lot to rope me into this, because genuinely speaking, I was quite excited about being here. I'm often not. But I am here because this to me is a sign of something really, really positive, really, really good. A lot of the organizations that I work in, the product side of the organization is the last to get on board. And it becomes an IT thing. Even if you are building software, software is just a piece of the puzzle. It's just a means to an end. It's the product that counts. It's the end-to-end life cycle that counts. It's getting that set-top box in that customer's house, whatever it is. That's what we're trying to get to. And the good news for you guys as product people is the Agile process. Of all the roles in the Agile process, you guys have power. You guys have authority. Your opinion matters. This is great. Yeah? You're working with Scrum Masters who have no authority. You're working with development teams. You guys, you get to set the priorities. You get to make decisions about things. You get to decide release dates. This is interesting, exciting stuff. But with great power comes great responsibility, as we all know. And so one of the things some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today are what you can do with that power and how that power might be better used. So as Mark quite kindly introduced, I've written a book about product ownership, and that book is focused around characteristics and traits and skills that product owners, the best product owners that I've worked with, have developed. And something that Niha was talking about struck a chord with me, and it reminded me of a product owner I worked with quite a few years ago. We'll call him Kenny, all right? Because again, I really don't want to get sued. And he worked for a computer game manufacturer up in Scotland. And they asked me to come in and run a workshop for them to facilitate a visioning workshop, a product backlog refinement, release planning session, that kind of thing. And I turned up, and the first thing I noticed was a nice, big, shiny BAFTA on the wall, on the shelf. So obviously the first thing I did was I took a selfie with it, show my kids. And I said, just out of interest, why am I here? You guys are obviously very successful at what you do. You're winning awards for computer games. I've never made a computer game in my life. Why do you need any help? They said, well, yeah, I mean, we did all right on the last one, but we've just come out of a 9-month research and development phase, and our venture capitalist backers are getting a little bit nervous that we haven't really got anything to show them. So we need a little bit of help just kicking this off, really. And my response was 9 months. I mean, again, never made a computer game in my life, but 9 months feels like a long time for research. And they said, oh, that's fair, Geoff, that's fair. It wasn't meant to be 9 months. But you've got to bear in mind, this is going to be huge, right? This is going to be groundbreaking. It's going to be a brand new game. We're being really innovative here. It's going to be completely unrestricted worlds. People can go wherever they want. It's not a scripted, linear kind of progression. And so building that from scratch, you've got to imagine it's a bit like writing a new operating system. Now, I've never written a new operating system either, but they said it's quite complicated, it's quite risky. There's lots of ways that we could do it. There's lots of technologies that we could use. And in order to make sure that we make the right decision, it's imperative that we do our due diligence and research the potential options to us. I said, well, that sounds sensible. And just jump in and make a decision. So they said we budgeted 6 months for it. And we researched all these technologies, and the idea was we put together a report, and we'd make a decision. But at the end of 6 months, what we found was a lot more new technologies had come out that we hadn't budgeted time to evaluate, and in order to make the best decision, we needed to research those. So we budgeted another 3 months to research the new ones. Some of the old ones had become redundant, so that was a kind of waste of time. But at the end of 3 months, there were some more, and we can't get ahead of the curve, Geoff. It's impossible. And so, well, it sounds like you've got a lot of information there. Have you got enough information to make a good enough decision? And so Niha was talking about the inability to make decisions. This is the number one thing for a product owner to be able to do, to be able to make decisions. Being decisive. Now Niha was offering you a really good thing there. She was saying, we're going to make sure that you have the information to make those decisions. And that might be a promise that you can't keep. Because in a complicated, fast-changing world, you're unlikely to have all the information necessary to make a perfect decision. And that's something that we've got to get comfortable with. Trying to make the perfect decision will often stop you making a good enough decision. And the beauty, to take Nigel's point, of test and learn, is that hardly any decisions are irreversible and catastrophic. If you've done a little bit of due diligence, if you've set that as Phil said, think about your experiments, think them through, don't just test anything, all right? Be prepared to fail and learn, then that's a good thing. There's lots of things that you can do to make things easier for you to be decisive, and this is some of the things that I work at on a psychological level with the product owners that I coach one-to-one. One interesting thing, choice. Choice in our society is seen as a good thing. You should have choice in which hospital you can use, choice in which school you can send your kids to, choice. You go to the supermarket, there's a lot of choices of mustard. I couldn't understand how many types of mustard there were in the world. All right? And I came across an interesting study by, I can't remember the second person's name, but the first person was Sheena Iyengar. And she studied jam. Everyone's got their thing, right? And so she went into a supermarket and she set up a stall that had 6 different types of jam on it. And you could have a free sample. So all these shoppers were coming in, they could try a free sample of any of those. They could try all 6 if they wanted to. Hey, go mad. And at the end of that, if I had my slide here, I'd know exactly what figure, but it was something around the 25% of people actually ended up buying one of those 6 jams. She also set up another stall which had close to 30 types of jam on it. And the stall that had 30 types of jam on it, only 3% of people actually chose the jam. Now, one of the underpinning aspects of that is overwhelming choice can be paralyzing. And if you think about, really assess what you're thinking, what the thought process you're going through when you have these choices, there's a flawed assumption, but it's still there, that by making a decision, I might be making the wrong decision. By picking a jam, 1 out of 6, okay, there's 1 right answer, 5 wrong answers. It's a flawed assumption, but it's part of our decision-making process at an unconscious level. 30 jams, there's 1 right answer, 29 wrong answers. There's much more chance of me being wrong there. And so what we find is by reducing the number of options available to us, we find it easier to make a decision. Now we can do that by gut, we can do it by instinct, we can do it by advice, by data, however we can do it, make that easier for ourselves. So the first characteristic that I talk to product owners about is be decisive. How can you make it easier for you and others to be decisive? And once you're in a position to make a decision, the second characteristic that I talk to product owners about is be ruthless. Okay? Now that's usually where people raise their eyebrows. Ruthless sounds like a kind of negative attribute. But actually, when Neha's talking about, ask yourself every time, is this the right thing for the customer? Is this the right thing for the end user? Being ruthless about what's important. We can't do everything. We can't do it all at once. So we be ruthless about where we focus our limited amount of energy, our limited amount of money, and we get stuff of importance done. One of the benefits from an Agile perspective is you get more stuff done by doing less stuff. Yeah. And being ruthless about that. And again, there's psychological underpinnings to that as well. If I'm saying no to a stakeholder, if I'm saying no to a feature, then I'm potentially upsetting somebody. I'm potentially missing out, because that is a valuable thing that I could do. All right? And I'm not going to get that value because I'm not going to do it. We need to shift that focus to, well, what value am I going to get by focusing on the thing that I am going to do? And no doesn't necessarily mean no in an Agile environment. Because we're iterating, we have many opportunities to change our minds, change our decisions. No becomes not yet, which isn't quite so final. So little things like that as a product owner, how can I make it easier for me to be ruthless? All right? That doesn't mean you can start whipping people and shouting at them and things like that. So yeah, if I have my little pictures in the background, you'd see a little acronym for me. So we've got D for decisive, we've got R for ruthless. Okay. The next thing is I for informed. The best product owners, I'm going to steal another of Neha's words, curious. They're curious. Okay. They're really interested in their domain. They're interested in their users, who's using them, the lives that they lead, how they're going to use the product. They're curious about how this interacts with other things. They're curious about the competition, what other things are out there, what alternatives there are. They're curious about trying things. They love experimenting. So get as much information as you can in the knowledge that you'll never get all the information, but also learn about yourself. Learn about what skills you have, what knowledge you have, and what's around you. In a complicated world that we live in, has anybody read I'm not sure what it is. Sometimes some people call it a poem, some people call it an essay. I'm not particularly educated. To me, a poem has to rhyme. So I'm a limerick kind of guy. But a guy called Leonard Reed, it's called I Pencils. Anybody read that? No? Okay, never mind. That story's going to fall flat. No, the idea behind this essay the idea is that this pencil is telling the reader its family history, which sounds a bit weird, all right? But it's telling the genius where the pencil came from. And what we can learn from that is that actually something as simple and day-to-day as a pencil, an object that you've used probably earlier than you've been able to walk, is actually quite a complicated thing. And there isn't one person in the world that could make a pencil on their own, which is quite a bold statement to make. But when you think about it, do you know anybody that knows where to find the tree and how to cut it down safely and how to take that cut down tree and shape it into the shape of a pencil. And if you did find that person, would that same person know where to source the graphite that goes in there to make the lead and to get that turned to the right shape and the right size and put those two things together? And if you did find one person that could do those two things, do you also know somebody who could source the materials to make the paint that coats it and the little gold lettering and stencil that goes on it and that little metal thing on the end that I used to know what the name was but now I don't, to hold the rubber? And can that same person also find and make the rubber and fit it in? It's unlikely, and that's something really, really simple. You guys are going to be dealing with things a little bit more complicated than a pencil, all right? So knowing that no matter how informed you can possibly be, you will never know everything. And so using the agile value of collaboration, bringing people in, building networks, finding out where the expertise is in your organization, and using that on a much more fluid basis is key. Being humble enough to know what you don't know as a product owner. So we've got informed. The next thing I want to talk about is being versatile. All right. Now, one of the interesting things about human nature, I think is interesting, you might not, is how we, in general, human beings don't like uncertainty. Now, an agile approach is most useful to us in environments where we can't predict the future, because if we could predict the future, we might as well just write the requirements and do it in a logical, efficient order. It's also most useful in an environment where things are likely to change quite often. Now, uncertainty and change are two things that freak out human beings. It increases our level of anxiety. We don't like that. I came across an interesting study recently. Again, you've probably seen it. It's not a recent study, but I came across it recently, where a group of people were offered the choice of having a small electric shock now, or the possibility that sometime in the next hour, they might get an electric shock, but they might not. All right? And they could choose. And what I found interesting was that the majority of people said, "Oh, just give me the shock now." Even though there was a chance that they wouldn't get the shock, the sword of Damocles hanging over their head of, "I might get a shock," was more distressing to them. They'd rather just get it out of the way. Which says to me a lot about how we really try and avoid uncertainty and anxiety. And the bad news is, if we're operating in an agile world, we've got that in spades. And we kind of have to embrace that. So how do we embrace that? Well, we have rituals. You know, we can say, well, yeah, every morning we're going to have a chat for 15 minutes, or every couple of weeks we're going to have a planning session, the same time, on the same day, this week. We can get into a routine and rhythm, which kind of brings that anxiety down a bit. But equally, you as leaders and product owners, product managers, you are massively leaders going forward. Okay, I'd probably rather get rid of the term product owner and product manager and just talk about product leader. But hey, leadership is something that we all do. And you provide massive amounts of leadership there. Leadership can be a huge way of reducing anxiety by providing some consistency. So in my leadership style, do I provide consistency? Are people relatively comfortable in predicting how I will react to a typical situation? If they are, they're worrying less about my reaction and more about the problem. Okay? If I'm worried about how this person's going to react, because sometimes they're like they're Jekyll and Hyde, my energy is somewhere else. It's not on the product. It's not on the customer. So as a product owner, if I can be that rock in terms of this is what you can expect from me, this is my leadership style, but equally be able to flex when the situation demands it. When you need to be ruthless, when you need to be decisive, you can be. When you need to coach, when you need to build relations, when you need to just take a hit and say, do you know what, that was valuable learning. You can do that. So that's what I call being flexibly firm. Yeah. And a lot of this work as a product owner, you're going to be balancing two ends of a kind of paradigm and finding your place within there. So we've got decisive, we've got ruthless, we've got informed, we've got versatile. Then we've got empowering. Okay, the best product owners that I've worked with are empowering. They realize that actually the best way to be an effective product owner is to bring other people along and give them the autonomy, the authority to put their knowledge, their experience, their perspectives into the process. As Nia said, she doesn't have time to make all the decisions herself. She shouldn't be, right? Because, no offense, you're not best placed to make all those decisions. There are people that are more qualified to make certain decisions than Neha is. Right? But because of her seniority, perhaps she's expected to. Product owners don't work on that kind of concept. They work on the best placed person or people should make those decisions. Your job as a product owner really is to define the problem space. What problem are we trying to solve? Help people understand what that is, why it's important, what the boundaries are that we are operating within, and then free that collaborative group up to put their collective wisdom, knowledge, experience, energy into solving that with you. Not for you, with you. So the best product owners are empowering of others, but they're also empowering of themselves, which might sound a strange thing to say. But a lot of the organizations I work in, there's this kind of expectancy that, well, I need to wait for somebody to authorize me to do this before I can do this. And no matter how many times you get your leaders on the stage that say, make decisions, you have authority, actually stepping up and saying, do I really? What happens if I make the wrong decision? Am I going to be hung out to dry? All right. I've heard it, but are you going to back that up? And it takes a while to actually step up into that space. And that will happen with you as well. You'll be saying, okay, I want you to make decisions. And you'll see teams that say, really? I'm not quite sure about that. And give them the support and the space and show them. Be vulnerable. That's another thing that I like that Mark's saying. You know, Phil telling his story about how the MVP didn't work. Yeah. Be vulnerable, share that, model that, role model these kinds of things. Make it easier for other people. This is what the best product owners that I've seen do. And then finally, to complete my acronym, my driven acronym, we've got negotiable. So you're going to be working with a lot of stakeholders who have different opinions. All right? Lots of people want lots of things. All those things are probably valuable to some degree, but we can't do all of them. We need to negotiate. Now, negotiation doesn't necessarily mean compromise. So one of the analogies that I use, which often doesn't go down very well, but I like it, so I figure I'm on the stage, so I'm going to use my analogy, is a camel was a horse that was designed by committee. All right? If you asked anybody, they wouldn't have designed the camel. All right? It's a mixture of a lot of different things. Now, yes, I know camels are perfectly designed for the desert with the long eyelashes and the storing of water and all that jazz, but that analogy of if you try and compromise, you end up pleasing nobody and you end up with a mishmash. You don't end up with a thoroughbred. All right? And the trick with the negotiation is not to work out the easy answer, the compromise. It's to take those hard decisions to end up with the good product. All right? Be able to explain why those decisions are being taken. Have the courage to make them, because with power comes responsibility. All right? And bring people along so they can understand why that decision is being made. Sometimes negotiation means negotiating with yourself. You will be tempted to put out an MVP that kind of cuts a few corners. You will be. All right? And to some degree, that's a good thing. Because that little voice is telling you, do I really need to analyze that? Do I really need to do that? And that can be a really powerful route to follow, that thought process. But negotiating between your head and your heart. All right? That's something that a lot of product owners do. They'll think these things through. They'll almost argue against themselves. Can I do this? Should I do this? What are my options? So being negotiable and avoiding camels. So that's, yeah, there you go. You can find a better analogy. So for me then, the best product owners are driven, okay? Make decisions, ruthlessly focus on what's good for the product and the customer, an overwhelming appetite for being informed and helping others be informed to make informed decisions, being versatile in your leadership style, empowering of others and empowering of yourself, and negotiable with stakeholders and negotiable with yourself. Now, I probably had some really cool pictures behind me that you've missed out on. Apologies, you've had to look at me instead of the screen. One of the final pictures that I would have had is a picture of a little cat just waiting outside a mouse hole, waiting to pounce. It has the word patience on it. Just imagine that. Because the best product owners are patient. It's not about getting there tomorrow. You're going to grow, you're going to develop, you're going to learn new skills, you're going to learn new habits, you're going to build new relationships, you're going to be developing this product over time. Your teams Your stakeholders are going to be learning, converting to a different way of working. That's going to take time. You'll take some steps back. You'll reflect and you think, maybe I shouldn't have done that. That's okay, all right? As long as we're learning from it. So have some patience with yourself. Give yourself a break now and again. Have some patience with others. You've heard the word journey a lot. I know people with your bullshit bingos, you probably ticked that off a few times. Yeah. But it is. It's, the X factor, it's a journey kind of thing. You've got to enjoy the journey. It's not about the end result, because actually the destination is going to continue to change. The journey is going to be a long one. If you can enjoy the journey, then you're halfway there. All right. Cool. I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to invite questions. Is that cool? Anybody got a question? Yes, at the back.
Thanks for calling out so many great things. I'm curious if you could give the audience ideas on ways you get better informed.
How you get better
Mechanisms
informed?
that you find work for getting the customer needs called out and how to prioritize them, and how to get better informed. What are some of the techniques you suggest?
Some of the techniques for being informed and finding out those customer needs. I mean, the simple, really pithy answer, easy one for me to throw out, is ask them. All right, but there's a big argument. I don't think he actually said this, did he? Ford. He didn't say, if I asked my customers what would they want, they'd ask for faster horses. I don't think he actually said that, but there is an element of that behind it. If your customers actually aren't aware of what's possible, then asking them, it won't necessarily give you that answer. People wouldn't necessarily have asked for the iPhone. The revolutionary breakthroughs, they might not ask. But actually, your customers are probably a lot better informed than you think they are. All right? So actually having some conversations with people, having some conversations with end users. But equally, I'll throw out there the idea that what people say they want and what they say they will do doesn't necessarily map to what they actually do. All right? I'd like to think that, I'm going to eat healthily and I'm going to exercise more, and I'll do that. But what I actually do is a better indicator of me and my patterns and my behavior. So observation is a good thing. All right? I'm not talking about spying. Maybe I am. I don't know. But everyone's being spied on these days with our cookies and our website tracking and things like that. We know a lot. We've got a lot of data out there about our users, and look at that. But product owners don't rely purely on data. Okay, they'll meet people, they'll talk to people, they'll match up their data with their gut instinct. And other people, when we got all those people in a room with those sticky notes, those software engineers had never met hardware engineers before, they'd never met field engineers before, they'd never spoken to Cisco before, because that had been the job of a project manager to handle all that stuff. But when you got those people in a room, they could ask each other questions that actually highlighted gaps. So the biggest benefit you can get in that area, in my opinion, is getting that cross-functional team together and putting pressure on the end-to-end life cycle and getting some empirical feedback as quickly as possible. Does that answer your question?
That was awesome.
Sorry?
That was awesome.
Cool. I'll take awesome. Anyone else? Yes?
What is the biggest barrier that you have seen organizations face while transforming into more agile processes or more product-centric development?
What's the biggest obstacle?
Yes.
Okay. What's the biggest obstacle I've seen organizations face when transforming into a more product-based organization? I guess the easy answer there is it's somebody else's responsibility to change. That view that you guys need to change what you're doing in order for this to work. At BT, we were so slow on doing this, we didn't engage the business side of our organization because we were worried about looking incompetent. So our CIO actually said, let's get it going in-house before we go and speak to the product side of the organizations and make fools of ourselves. All right? Which you can kind of understand because there's a nervousness there. But actually what that then became was the product side of the organization felt something was being done to them. Now, people will resist anything that's imposed upon them, even if it is for their own good, just because we like free will and our autonomy. Wet paint, I'm going to touch it. Screw you. And IT would think, well, product need to change. And product saying, well, you need to change. And actually forgetting about the end result. Now, that's something that I was talking to a group last night about leadership within an Agile organization. And we are looking for leadership. And you've got some leaders up here talking about the values that we're looking for, the things that we're looking for. It's okay to try things and so on. It's okay to make decisions, that kind of thing. And we're looking for our leaders to match those words with actions. But equally, you will be being observed by other people. So if you say, for example, an MVP is a good thing, and then you end up delivering something that's 12, 18 months, the words and the actions need to match up. If they don't, we hold our hands up and say, screwed up there, failure bow. All right? And that sometimes can be more powerful than being successful. So are you walking the talk? And that's not just your leaders, it's you, it's everyone. Are you trying to walk the talk? That's one of the biggest things there. It's actions not matching words. And people pay attention to actions more than words. Yeah. I think the other, this is probably going a little bit too far, so apologies for this. But maybe not. Maybe this is good. I'll jump in and see what happens. In fact, Simon and Lisa and I were just talking at breakfast about this. One of the biggest challenges we see within organizations is that we'll see a lot of energy like this. And we have leaders who genuinely believe in what they're doing, and they're making this big transition and big investment and big change. Don't underestimate the investment that is in something like this. This is a huge thing, and things like that. But leaders don't necessarily always stay around to see the transition through, because they're going on to other things, perhaps, moving to different departments. They've got different challenges, different things. And that kind of succession planning for the continuity of the change is where a lot of organizations fall down. And you see a step back or a change in completely different direction. So I always encourage people to think, well, where's the succession planning here? How are we going to make sure this follows on if I decide, if I win the lottery and I don't come back to work tomorrow? All right? Obviously, these guys, if they would come back to work if they won the lottery, because they love their job so much. But some people, they would quit. And devolving that authority and that power and that leadership to you guys is a key part of that. You guys have got to accept that as well and run with it. Take them at their word. Make decisions. See how they react. Yes, at the back. Stand up and shout.
My question is how to get the wider organization to embrace this agility mindset and mentality.
Okay. How to get the wider organization to embrace the mindset. I operate on the premise that I can never get anybody to do anything. I mean, I'm a dad, I can tell my kids to do things, but sometimes. But I operate on the premise that I can never get anybody to do anything. But I can create the conditions where they might want to. So I'd ask myself, well, why would the organization want to embrace this mindset? What's in it for them? How can I help them see that? How can I make it easier for them to adopt it? And if they're pulling this towards them, that's so much more effective than me pushing it onto them. How can I invite them in? How can I create an environment where actually they're knocking on my door saying, can I be part of that? All right? And we did that at BT, not deliberately, all right? But we had someone who was up for change. He was so frustrated with how things were going. That was our target. All right? So we spoke to Mike. We said, Mike, come down to the pub. We're buying some drinks. We're having a night out on me. And we're going to talk about projects. We're going to talk about how things have been not going very well. I want to hear all your concerns. We're going to change things. And we didn't have to talk about Agile, and we didn't have to talk about sprints and product owners and backlogs and all that kind of stuff. We just said, could we do some of your stuff sooner and then do the rest later? Would that be of value to you? He said, well, yeah, I'd rather get something in 3 months than 2 years, absolutely. Okay, so what would be the most important stuff to you? How valuable to you would it be if we could get something in a couple of months' time? What would you be prepared to do to help us with that? Because we got some challenges in making that happen, but we want it to happen. And we did something, and Mike was happy. And Mike went away, and he spoke to Linda, and he spoke to Steve, and he spoke to all his other colleagues, perhaps on the golf course or perhaps in a networking event. And then before we knew it, we had people phoning up my boss saying, we want some of that rugby stuff. I said, what do you mean that rugby stuff? Well, yeah, where we can change our minds halfway through the project and you don't bill us. That's not quite what it is. But seeing as we've got you on the phone, let's have a discussion about what it actually is. And people were knocking on the door saying, well, we want some of this stuff, because Mike had the chance to stop halfway through the project, and you didn't bill him for all the stuff that he didn't want. That's amazing. Can we have some of that? So yeah, we created the conditions where people started knocking on our door, and they pulled it from us. Yes. Emily, I can read your name badge. I can read that far.
Hiya.
Hi.
One of the challenges we have at Amex, and I think Nigel touched on this, is we have an annual financial cycle, which is SQP. So we're given a set amount of money and we have to deliver a return within that year.
Yeah.
Now, many of our products, and I'm talking about systems here, are legacy systems that have had minimal investment over the years, and actually to bring them up to where they need to be requires a huge amount of funding. So what are your thoughts on how we balance that short-term return, but also making large-scale transformations to these systems that is going to take years and years?
Yeah. How do you get people to back onto the financial straight and narrow when they've got a massive credit card debt? Because all their money's going on to paying the interest. So anyway, that's my analogy. No. So what was the original question? Say it again for me.
How do we better balance short-term returns with larger scale transformational change when
so we've got the legacy systems,
yes,
and we've got legacy processes that aren't necessarily going to help us be agile. Without exception, I hesitate to say things like that because there's very rarely extremes that are true. But without exception, I'm pretty confident of saying there's no organization that's made any kind of successful transformation to a more agile organization or more product-focused organization without treating that transformation in an agile way itself. Now, what I mean by that is we will have a list of things that we want to do, and we can't do all of them. So let's prioritize. So let's pick the area that's going to give us most value. Now, that might be pain. How can we reduce the pain? It might be how can we increase our throughput, our cycle time, what have you. We focus on that area. There are going to be problems that get in the way. We call those impediments. We call those blockers. Right? And those would go on our transformational backlog, if you like. And so the funding process might be something that we could put on there. And as a cross-functional group across the organization, people from all different areas will start working on those impediments at an organizational level and say, how can we help these teams be more agile? How can we get out of their way? All right? And to take your specific example of the funding situation, that's there for a reason. All right? So the first thing is, well, why do we have that in place at the moment? What purpose is that serving? Let's assume that it is serving a purpose. What purpose is it serving? Could we serve that purpose in another way, or could we actually remove the need for that purpose in itself? So it could be that that funding process is in place because we actually have no confidence that we're going to see any kind of return in the short term because we have to wait until the end of 2-year projects to get anything. Okay, so if we actually said to you that we could show you some return earlier, would you be happy with 6 months instead of a year? So we could take an interest, let's try it. Equally, you might have some teams out there, again, hypothetically speaking, some teams within a hypothetical national telecoms company might just ignore the rules. And I was working on a project, one of the first agile projects that I was working on was for the NHS. And the NHS, pretty structured, traditional government organisation, highly contracted, and BT, highly contracted. So before the development team even saw the work, dates had been agreed, money had been signed off, requirements had been agreed, and they were given to the development team, do it. That's me and my development team. And just by having a couple of conversations with this customer account holder, saying, all right, of all this 2.5 years worth of work, where should we focus? Where should we start? What's the most important thing? And he said, well, it's all important, Geoff. I said, well, yeah, I know that. But what's the most important? I've got to do something today. What shall I do today? I said, all right, well, let's do that. All right, we'll do that. And within 2 weeks or within a month, he said, you could use that if you want. Have a look, see if it works. What do you think? And you could have that. And we kept going like that. And after about 3 or 4 months, he said, we got some change requests coming in. I said, well, how important are they? He said, really important. Yeah, needed to be done yesterday, that kind of important. He said, are they more important than the stuff that's currently on our list? He said, well, yeah. So is anything on that list now not as important as it used to be? Yeah, probably, these ones. Should we just swap them? All right. By the time we got to the end of that project, a lot of those initial requirements just had been shipped out. And he'd shipped his money into something else without having to go through a really painful change board and process and things. And we ended up with, funnily enough, a happy customer. Despite that budget being agreed in advance, we couldn't change it. We couldn't change any of the contracts that had been agreed. But we basically broke the rules of the change process. And I was working with that caused me more problems because, again, that guy then went away and said, well, you did it for this guy. Can you do it with this guy? But it put a bit of pressure on the process. I have worked with a consultancy that will remain nameless. Probably won't be too hard to guess who it is. And we were doing a bit of an Agile introduction with them. They're sort of senior account managers. I think you call them vice presidents or whatever. And we're going through these Agile principles, and we respond to change. We value responding to change and all this kind of stuff. And he said, whoa, Geoff, I'm going to stop you there. Responding to change. That's an interesting one. So what you're saying, customers can change their minds for free? I said, well, yeah. He said, but we make a lot of money out of customers changing their minds. We make a lot of money out of customers getting their requirements wrong, and then we have to go through, and that's the big, if we're going to go Agile, that's going to hurt our bottom line. I said, yeah, probably will. But you might end up with some happy customers. He said, well, we don't need happy customers. I said, well, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, that's a business model. Yeah, there's nothing necessarily. I mean, it's unethical, but it's not illegal. And I said that's fine for now. But eventually, more and more of your competitors are going to come around and offer your competition, your customers, a different way of working, and that's going to be better for them, and you'll lose them. He said, well, until that day comes, we're quite happy. Thank you very much. They didn't want to change because they had a process that helped them. It didn't help their customers. And you can. Going off on stories, I do that. But what I'm trying to say there is that all of those things are changeable, not tomorrow, but they don't have to be changed tomorrow. They could be experimented with. How am I doing? Have I got time for one more story? One more story. Okay, sorry. So this was, again, back at BT. We'd done some stuff internally now, but again, the big boy projects, we finally got into one of those. But then the next big hairy monster was dealing with your external customers. Right? So we sold stuff to your high street stores and things like that, mobile phone providers, things like that. And we hadn't actually tackled the problem with them. We hadn't said anything to them about this Agile stuff. And we were involved in this one piece of work that has just gone terribly. I mean, they hated us. They couldn't wait for this project to finish, this contract to finish. And so we knew that they didn't want to work with us anymore, but because of crazy legal requirements, us being the incumbent meant they had to invite us to tender for the new RFP. So we were basically going along to this pitch knowing that we weren't going to get selected, we weren't going to win. I mean, that's a kind of waste of a day, right? That's not a motivating thing to think when you're getting out of bed in the morning. So we thought, well, could we turn this to our advantage? What could we get out of this? What benefit could we get? And he said, well, let's try talking about an Agile thing. Let's try talking to them about it. All right? We'll fail, but it doesn't matter because we're not going to get the work anyway. So we'll just try it. So we turned up and we said, paraphrasing now, obviously, we said, we've read your requirements. Thank you very much. Kept me awake at night. Very comprehensive. We've looked through them all, and what we've got to say is we don't know how long it would take us to deliver that. We don't know how much it's going to cost. We're pretty sure you don't know what you want either, with all due respect. We're pretty sure there's stuff in that set of requirements that you will never, ever use. I'm not sure what it is yet, but we're pretty sure there's some stuff in there you won't use. And we're also pretty sure there's stuff that you will want that isn't in there. So we genuinely don't know. But we also know that coming to you and saying, we don't know, isn't helpful. So what we'll do instead is we'll ask you to pick the most important stuff, the MVP, all right? And we'll work on that, and we'll spend a month on it. And this is how much a month will cost you. At the end of the month, you can have it because it'll be functional. You can keep that if you want, and you can walk away. But if you like it and you want to carry on, then pick your next slice of functionality. We'll work on that for a month, and it will cost you exactly the same as the first month. And at the end of that month, you can keep it, and you can walk away. And we'll just carry on like that. But that's all we've got. Yeah? If you change your mind, you can bring in something that wasn't in the requirements. We don't mind, whatever it is. We'll just work on whatever's most important to you that month. And so thank you very much. And we left. And what response do you think we got from them? they did hire us. It's not as clear, not as simple as that. The first response was, well, that was refreshing. I said, what do you mean refreshing? They said, well, we know people turn up to these meetings and they lie to us. We know that. So we end up just picking the cheapest liar. And we ask contracts to write a contract so that when they eventually screw up, we can sue them, and the project ends up costing less. And that's fine. But what you've done is you've given us an opportunity to manage our risk. It's quite cheap. We're not going to commit to millions of pounds with you. It's 1 month's worth of money. And we can change our mind for free. That's quite a good thing. And we might actually end up with something useful rather than the crap you normally deliver for us. So what we've decided to do is we've decided to go with you and the cheapest liar. So we can sue them, and hopefully that'll pay for what you end up delivering. I thought that was quite clever. But it caused another problem for us, because then I had to go back to the contracts team at BT and say, guys, I'm sorry, we accidentally won some business. We didn't mean to win it, and we've actually got to get a team together that might only be there for a month, but it might be there for years, and they can cancel at the drop of a hat. I'm really sorry, didn't think it would happen, my bad. I left the company shortly after that. But what was interesting there was that then started the process of, well, I have no idea how to form a contract, but contracts people do. And this, how can we form a contract that would encourage that kind of behavior for our customers to win and for us to win, and mutually beneficial? And so the next iteration of it was, well, we'll commit to 6 months' worth of work. You can walk away at the end of any month, pay us for that month, and 10% of months 2 to 5 if you want to cancel early, which was a little bit more mutually beneficial. And that was an iterative process between two parties that actually thought, do you know what? You're thinking about us now. That wasn't institutionalized. The standard structure and processes were still there. But the beauty of working within a big organization is you can try lots of different things. Yeah, try different things. See what works for you. Use some evidence. I think that's my time, right? I've got to get off. All right. Thank you for tolerating my stories and for having to look at me rather than slides. That would have been nicer, but there we go.